Thank you. Next on the agenda, as promised at our last board meeting, I do have an update for the board related to school safety and security. And Mr. Pritchard is here to provide that update. I do also want to note that we're joined by John Casula, our emergency management manager, who's been a big part of these efforts. And so I want to acknowledge his attendance as well. Mr. Pritchard.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Cashwell. I'm happy to be here today to provide updates on school safety and security in HCPS. School safety is a crucial matter that demands continuous attention and proactive measures to ensure the well-being of students and staff. HCPS has been proactive in adding to and improving our school safety layers, and we will continue to review security protocols, identify potential risk, and implement preventive measures. As noted on this slide, HCPS has made significant investments over the years and just within the school year to ensure our schools remain a safe place to learn and work. With the help of our HPD partners, we are adding 10 additional SROs. As you know, HCPS has invested $5.2 million for new cameras and $5 million for blue ribbon safety panel safety recommendations. I would again like to state that it is important to recognize that safety measures are not foolproof and cannot guarantee complete protection from all potential risk or threats. We must continue to have all of our HCPS stakeholders communicate and be responsive to any potential safety concerns and have contingency plans in place to address any emergencies that may arise. Weapon scanners are one additional layer that can help prevent potential threats. By using weapon scanners, we can deter and proactively identify and prevent the entry of weapons onto school grounds, reducing the risk of violence and harm, but they remain a single layer in our comprehensive approach. Over the last 2 weeks, HCPS has been soliciting the input from all of our families and staff on the topic of school safety, specifically around the use of weapon scanners and adding additional school security staff to our buildings. The survey closed last night and we received a very strong response of 6,200 responses in 5 different languages. This survey was designed to gather feedback from our entire community and complements the surveys we did with families and staff at field test schools earlier this spring. We will bring you a complete analysis of the findings from the survey at the May 25th work session. It is also important to note that when it comes to the use of weapon scanners, each school and division model is tailored to their unique needs. There is no single standardized approach. So in addition to our field tests, we have made site visits and had conversations with several school districts that use or are considering scanners. Since our last meeting, we had the opportunity to visit Hopewell, which has recently converted their traditional metal detectors to weapon scanners. We also continue the conversations with divisions implementing them for the first time. As we consider refining recommendations for HCPS, we are taking these lessons into consideration and applying them to our own local context. The number of weapon scanners needed for all school levels will depend on several factors, including the size of the school, the number of students and staff, and the access points of the school. Based on what we observed during the field testing and information gathered from our principals, we estimate that HCPS would need the listed number of primary and secondary scanners per each school level. This takes into account the style of school and various numbers of access points, supplemental units for other events and replacements. In addition to the scanners, the staffing of these new systems requires thoughtful consideration and strategic planning and budgeting in order to deploy new scanners effectively. There are 2 different elements as to staffing the scanners that HCPS is exploring: additional school security officers, stipends for existing staff and teachers, and contracted staff. We have learned about different configurations of those 2 staffing elements in our conversations with other divisions. This topic is a priority area for us as we continue to learn from our divisions. First, we believe we will need to expand our pool of school security officers by by about 70 positions to provide additional coverage for all schools. We currently have SSOs at the secondary level. The addition, we must ensure we are competitive in the region. We must ensure that we are competitive in the regional market for current and future positions. To retain existing candidates and attract candidates for vacant and any new positions, SSO compensation has now been raised from a grade 15 to an 18, which will take effect effectively July 1st. This is in addition to the 8.2% raise that they will receive. We are also evaluating and the training our SSOs are required to receive by the state and training that is supplemental that we require as a division and looking into enhancing those opportunities as well. We also want to ensure all our SSOs have the same expectations from central office and are fully supported in their roles. So we are looking at our current management structure for those positions as we consider expanding the team. If it grows, different structures and additional capacity may be needed to support them out of the safety office. Second, we are looking at stipends for school safety and who may volunteer to staff the scanners as an additional duty, which is an approach used by many of the divisions we've been learning from. We recognize these would be additional duties. Staff would only be compensated for if they volunteered and would not be a comprehensive solution to staffing the new process. At the next school board meeting, I will provide an update on the final community survey, phased implementation plan, procurement and availability updates, as well as staffing analysis and cost and the budgetary impact. This concludes my update, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pritchard, and Dr. Cashwell for bringing the update back to the board, as we wanted to have brief updates before our June 22nd presentation from you about exactly what the plan looks, what your security plan looks like and the execution. So thank you for that. I'm going to start to my left, Ms. Atkins.
I absolutely appreciate the update. I have a question around the timing for, trying to get to the appropriate slide. So we will receive an analysis on May 25th. I also want to ask if possible, if it is completed before May 25th, to receive it before May 25th, to have the opportunity to truly digest and discern what makes sense. Individually for each district as well as collectively as a whole. I think if you share that information with me on May 25th, I might be a bit overwhelmed and not have the opportunity to process through the data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. I will also ask that when you share your analysis that you present not only the percentage, but the raw numbers as well, to better understand the full story of what our constituents are trying to tell us. The other question I have is around the numbers, regarding the number of scanners. Actually, let me back up. This presentation is mostly on scanners. I've not heard much about the handheld wands. Are we going to increase an investment in that space, or is that no longer being considered?
It is. So I want to address your first question so it's not lost. Yes, absolutely. As data is available, we can certainly provide it to the board, but formally at the 25th meeting, we'll provide an overview both for the board and the public about survey results. And so as soon as we're able to get data available, the survey just closed last evening, but to your point, we'll make sure that's available to the board, and any other bits and pieces of information we have in advance of the next board meeting as well will be shared. This is a preliminary estimate of the number of scanners. It does not take into account other pieces of equipment like some of the tables that Mr. Pritchard mentioned before related to bringing laptops through the sliding tables. We do have some wands on hand, so we're still working through those pieces, but did want to provide at this juncture at least a rough estimate related to the weapon scanners.
I appreciate that, and I'm hopeful on the 25th or before we can see the bigger picture, because I will continue to say it's all these different layers of strategies. And when we're thinking about investment, I'm happy to hear that we're going to look at getting more wands, the handheld, because it's so mobile, not only for before and after school events, but of course during school if necessary. And then, you know, I don't know if we're going to be ordering more tables or we're pulling tables from somewhere else. I think having that bigger picture helps. So I look forward to learning more in that space. And when I'm looking at the preliminary estimates for high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools, I'm interested in learning how we got to those numbers, because when I think about high schools, if you ordered 70, that's about 7 per high school. And then at middle school, with the order that you have here, which are 60, I'm looking at about 5 per middle school. In elementary, we're going to order 100, which would be maybe about 2 or 3 per elementary school. So help me if my math calculations are inaccurate, but I'm really trying to understand, are we going to pick specific schools, or how are we getting at this estimate of what we need or desire?
This estimate looks at the rough number to outfit all high schools, all middle schools, all elementary, understanding that each design is very different. So we have outdoor campuses. Some schools have distinctly different bus entries and car rider entries and so forth. So really, based on the models we've looked at, as well as the model we field tested, and rough first estimates looking at each building design, that's the total number for high schools, but it wouldn't necessarily mean that number would be divided by the number of high schools and then the same amount provided. So it's a rough estimate. To your point, some might have a few more, some might have a few less, depending on their design. That just gets us at a total big picture number.
Thank you. And it's very helpful to have that, and I look forward to seeing how many goes where for the points that you just clarified. I appreciate that. Let's see, and I had one more. So specific to Varina, Sanson, and Howland Springs, and thinking about the type of campuses in these particular communities, I'm going to zone in on Varina High School. I want to know, have you explored sort of aesthetically pleasing fencing for Varina High School? Has that been a part of the conversation at all for safety?
No, ma'am, it has not. I mean, I know that it's been brought up before, but it's not something that we continue to talk about and look at and investigate, but no.
So I can share, I'm going to move my school board hat and just put on my mom cap, and being a resident of the community for so long, I know that it has been presented, fencing. It sounds old, it sounds traditional, but it also sounds like it may work and prevent harm. And I don't know what the discovery process is. I'm almost certain that it might be cheaper than some of these others that we've discussed. I think they all could be helpful, but I am going to ask to take a moment to look into fencing, a fence. I think fence prevent a lot of things, which is why many residents have them around their homes. And so when I'm thinking safety, I'm not only talking about weapons, but animals. So when you live in a community where we are, where it's deers or raccoons, we have bears. And so when you think about open campuses and safety, Mr. Pritchard, please go through the discovery process of putting up a fence for Varina High School. Is something constituents have asked for many, many years, and I'm asking for it as a resident, and I'm also asking as a school board representative.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, we'll continue to have that discussion, but I think it's also important. One of the things that came out of the blue ribbon finding, because that was our focal point, was access to get to the building. If you put up a structure to keep people out, you're also limiting access in a response in a crisis situation. So that we do have these discussions, and we'll continue, and I think it's worthwhile to take a look at and see where we can land on this.
And I also have some data from a fire marshal and a couple others on how to appropriately put fencing up that is also pleasing, right? We're not building a prison, but it is also accurate that fencing does prevent not only crime, but harm. And so there is a way to put up a fence that will allow your first responders to enter the building. And there's several examples of that at many schools throughout Virginia. And I'm more than happy to share that data with you and Dr. Cashwell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Atkins. Ms. Ogburn.
Just a quick question, Mr. Pritchard. You had mentioned our school security officers. Do you happen to know how many vacancies we have right now for that position?
Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Just
We can
curious.
get back to
I know
you.
we
Yeah,
had,
we can
We'll
get that back
provide
to
that
you.
later.
okay,
Yes.
if we could.
Yes.
Do you have any idea how long the training is? What's involved in becoming an SSO? Because you had talked about, I mean, I don't know if you know these questions, but
Well, I would just point out, these are not Henrico police officers. These are members of the Henrico team.
Right.
Whose primary job is safety and responsibility. So we do that training annually with our folks. But as far as job requirements and those kinds of things, which you might be aiming at, I don't know that I could list those right here, but we're happy to provide a summary of that. And kind of what, our training isn't one time, so there's some initial training, but we do conduct that annually. So
well, I'm
we'll
just
provide a
curious,
summary.
you know, because if we have vacancies now and we need that many more to man these things, I'm just,
right.
you know, that's where I'm going with
So-
it. Because one of my concerns about this, and we've all talked about it, is who is going to monitor them? And that's, I mean, that's just such a huge challenge.
And certainly our
so-
school security officers currently in place have a number of things on their plate outside of looking
Right.
at school arrival times and anything that might be involved with the weapon scanning process. So yes, they are a key member of the school safety and security team in partnership with the administration and our school resource officers. So I would, you know, simply note that we recognize the key role our SSOs play. Our human resources team worked with our school safety team to evaluate the position. And as Mr. Pritchard mentioned, there's been a regrade there to more accurately reflect the responsibilities, but we continue to evaluate that.
But, and as in all things, we can put out our hiring sign, you know, that we want to post everywhere, because this is going to be a big thing to have enough people to man this, the monitoring of the scanners when they're in place, which I think is so important. And I remember years ago, we had a discussion about retired police officers with our SSOs and our SROs, and I honestly don't remember where we landed. Dr. Cashwell, I don't know if you remember that conversation, but
Yes.
retired police officers and how their, you know, pensions and all of that stuff is affected
There's
by.
a program called Encore that's newer for Henrico General Government that's specific to retired police officers in the SRO program that allows them to return. And then we've mentioned before, this kind of goes across the teaching ranks more specifically in hard to staff areas where VRS has some flexibility where you can continue to draw your VRS and return full-time into a teaching position. But, you know, that's different than some of the law enforcement requirements. But I know that the police department has leveraged that Encore program in order to bring back retirees.
Yeah, we're going to have to do some heavy-duty recruiting, and that's a good place to do it for our SSOs. But anyway, I'll just bring those little things up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ogburn. Mrs. Shea.
Thank you. I'll start just kind of continuing the conversation that Ms. Ogburn ended with. And so I see, well, first of all, I'm just really appreciative of the responsiveness of carefully looking at staffing for this issue. I know that's something multiple of us brought up at the last presentation. So thank you for being so thoughtful in multiple approaches and evaluating them. One of the solutions is looking at adding about 70 SSO positions. So I've had a lot of questions from my constituency as to why we're talking about SSOs and not SROs. So SROs being members of the Henrico Police Department. So Dr. Cashwell, could you just talk a little bit about how the SROs are a partnership with Henrico Police, we don't kind of have unilateral control, and also how the staffing of those additional 10 that we added last year, how successful have we been in able to recruit candidates?
Sure. So I think the first slide Mr. Pritchard showed noted the investment for 10 more SROs. I believe those still have not been filled. They may have made some headway, but I believe the last report I had from the chief was that those had not been recruited. They had not been successful in filling those positions because, again, there's specialized training for school resource officers that's different and above and beyond the training that's for all police officers. So anyway, the point is we've added 10 there, and then at the SSO side of things, we want to make sure we're shoring up the Henrico staff team and safety team. And as we mentioned, those would be our staff members reporting up through our administrators and school safety office. And so while we're grateful for the partnership with our SROs, we know that it is indeed a partnership. And again, our school administrators, along with the SSOs, balance those safety responsibilities in the building.
Thank you. I think there's a common misconception, like if we want them, we will find them, and it's just not that simple. So thank you. And then also, I appreciate in here that y'all share the visits with the other school divisions. That's another question I've gotten. Are you people asking, are you looking at what other divisions have done? Absolutely. We're looking at it. We're learning from it. We're gleaning information that we have. So thank you for all y'all's work in that. This is not something that's being put together hasty. This is something that we're trying to move expeditiously through, but in a thoughtful manner that can be successful. So thank you for your diligent work in that.
Thank you, Mrs. Shea. Reverend Cooper.
No, thank you so much, Mr. Pritchard, for this. I'm excited to see the specificity around what we're planning to do and actually being able to put a price tag to it, and know that this is just kind of a part of where we are compared to where we will be next month for the presentation. So I'm appreciative of you all providing us this brief update, and I'm still appreciative of our intentionality with our layered approach, and it's not one size fits all, taking into consideration the specificity of the different style schools, different student population, and to Mrs. Ogburn's point, as well as Ms. Shea's statement in regards to staff, and I brought it up last time. We all know the crunch we're under, and anytime we add any additional responsibilities, just making sure we have enough personnel to implement it is key. So I'm glad to hear that we are working toward that goal as well. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Cooper. Mr. Pritchard, my colleagues have covered it. I appreciate I just want to make a comment as to what Reverend Cooper was just saying, the plan, right? This is a thoughtful plan. We're going to have everything worked out. The update was important. I know my constituents didn't want us to go from our April meeting all the way to June 22nd and really not give an update on safety. So really, thank you for letting us know where we are in the process. And like anything that we want to do this well and do it right. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.